Yes. Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome to all of you. This is a pleasure to moderate this webinar in the series of Linking Tourism and Conservation. As you know, this is a network of experts and practitioners who do exactly that. Through your work, the members of Linking Tourism and Conservation do contributions to conservation of biodiversity through tourism. There are linkages, clear and evident results for conservation from tourism operation as business. So it is under that premise that we are doing the second webinar in the LT&C series. In the first one, we heard a number of LT&C champions, people operating in the field. But what came out of the first discussion was the opportunity to look particularly at what we call the enabling environment around LT&C champions, meaning that if you operate tourism for profit with a view to contributing to conservation, which is a very common phenomenon all over the world, it means that you have to operate as tourism. And if you operate as tourism under the current conditions of COVID-19 crisis that have stopped travel, the travel business, the sector, for up to 90%, most destinations in the world today still have very serious restrictions to travel arrivals, and many of the originating countries have restrictions. So that we all in the tourism and conservation community face a very serious situation. This was the issue the last time, the last webinar. How are people going around that? How are they creatively finding ways to make tourism still feasible and to continue the contribution to conservation? So what we want to do today is to look at the enabling environment, meaning how can we find the tools that help people like the speakers of today? So the idea basically today is to, first of all, ask a specialist from the World Bank, Sean Mann, who has been involved in many ways in creating conditions from the World Bank, the largest multilateral development bank, in making sure that tourism can address conservation and also societal needs, economic needs in countries. So from his experience, we want to hear not only about some very concrete tools to finance tourism for conservation in certain countries in Africa, but more so, he agreed to title his presentation, Democratizing Such Financial Tools, which is a very nice provocation, particularly in view of yesterday's results. So how can we make those tools more widespread in Africa? That's the title of his presentation. And right after that, we will ask Netsai Bowman and Greg Bakunzi, who are both people with a very significant experience in tourism, sustainable tourism for conservation in Africa, how they are faring in the COVID-19 situation, what their original business model is, and what kind of support can multilateral organisms such as the World Bank in the case of Sean, but also as the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is where I work, how can we help create what kind of asks, what kind of requests, what kind of needs do these people, our LT&C champions, have? So without further ado, I hope you understood the questions. There will always be the chat space for you if this wasn't clear enough. But I want to give Sean the word. So Sean, off you go, and thanks for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you, Oliver. I hope everyone can hear me. Just give me a thumbs up. Yes, okay.
Yes, we can.
All right, great. And you can see the screen?
Yes.
Right, okay. Okay, well.
Refreshing.
Yeah. Yes, so as Oliver was just saying, COVID has, impacted this sector like nothing ever before, and drawn questions about, the linkages between tourism and conservation, the very sustainability of conservation. the accountability for conservation. That sort of speaks a little bit to the slightly provocative title there. So what I've seen, and maybe I just offer a little bit of perspective. What I've seen over the past year, especially, is an acceleration of sort of global noise, if you like, about biodiversity and climate, and about how these mitigation measures are being financed, and an opening of maybe new sources of finance, certainly a thinking towards natural capital, and how natural capital can be valued and how it can begin to be bought and sold in a more systematic way. What is missing from this whole picture? And I think what COVID has really done is it's shown us that this reliance on tourism for conservation, is maybe not enough. For conservation. So just by way of background, I think I'm talking to the converted here, so I'm not going to be saying anything new in this part. Conservation landscapes are undervalued. Why are they undervalued? Basically because, at least I think this is sort of a common understanding, that economic values traditionally in our societies are attached to to things that attached to land that you can build things on, you can extract from, you can grow things on. And conservation has basically been limited to this narrow revenue stream of tourism, or concessional finance in some form or another. This is a sector that has been supported traditionally by by donors, by bilateral governments, by philanthropy, and I guess what I'm trying to say here is that this has, in a sense, shifted the gaze of governments away from their own accountability for these areas to saying, okay, well, let's just take an example of a World Bank project. We have a World Bank project that is supporting, say, a protected areas authority, and we're spending millions and millions on infrastructure, but the accountability for that is between the government and the World Bank. And one argument I would like to make is that this accountability needs to change. It needs to be between the government and the people of the country. So there is a necessity to shift a little bit the gaze away from foreign donors and external parties to something that is much more rooted in the citizens of the country. So, and all of this to say is that there basically isn't a strong enough business case for conservation. And, it has been that way for 50 plus years. Tourism is clearly not enough, and maybe even conservation as the way we understand it and the way we've understood it for the past 50 years is a little bit too narrow. And we have to be thinking about natural capital instead. So, what are these different values and different, sources of financing? Again, I think I'm not saying anything new here. Obviously, the water, soil, biodiversity, carbon, these are all nascent credit offset markets. The value of these investments in these markets, or the value of investments in these markets, is growing, and it's actually growing too fast for supply. So we've done quite extensive survey work over the past 6 months with institutional investors, and talking specifically about Africa being a provider of, say, biodiversity offsets or carbon offsets. And the answer clearly coming back is that there isn't a pipeline. We don't have viable projects in Africa that are measured, reported on, verified independently, that can provide at scale enough to attract this institutional capital. So what we're left with is a series of scattered, maybe ad hoc relationships, bespoke kind of financing arrangements okay, they're good. They obviously are providing a different source of capital and changing the relationship between the kind of stakeholders of that land and the respective financiers. But it's not really enough. And how do we elevate this to scale? How do we get governments actually interested in thinking about either debt for nature swaps or thinking about sovereign bonds around their protected areas, that where they can guarantee the different co-benefits that might come from this natural capital. So, I mean, the idea here is that there is an alternative source of finance for conservation landscapes, but that market is not yet developed. And, for this to be viable, there is going to, it's going to be driven by reported and verified results. It's going to be driven by systems that are in place that international capital markets can rely on and can report on and can track. And yeah, so I mean, these sources of finance are diversifying, but the business case is still a little bit weak. This is the challenge, if you like, that has definitely emerged during this past year. So when we were, kind of looking at this, to some extent internally within the bank, although within the bank group, but and there are definitely some initiatives happening at the sort of corporate level to begin to think about this more systematically. But we were faced with also an existential crisis with businesses in these ecosystems that are basically going bust, and unlike other countries, other say OECD countries or more developed countries, where bailout packages have come for SMEs, have come specifically for the tourism sector, this has not happened in Africa. But the SME space, which makes up probably 99% of the businesses operating in conservation in Africa, conservation and tourism. There is, it's risky, and there is, a fair amount of aversion to supporting this. So. What I'm going to showcase here are two different initiatives that we are launching in now, but have been in the kind of pipeline for the past 6 months or so, that are trying to get at this mismatch between the supply of possible pipeline projects that can be supported and the demand from external financiers and a whole range of financing, from direct sort of grant funding to people looking for commercial returns, and the impact investors in between that are looking for biodiversity or water or social or jobs kind of impacts. And there is a mismatch also in Africa, where this whole space is a mosaic of disparate and not well coordinated players. supporting an individual little project here and an individual community there. And this is, it again isn't really helping. So we saw a pressing need to try and find some way to get financing into companies in the ecosystem as a short-term measure, but then longer term, we saw this need for the establishment of some kind of change in the dialogue with governments and change in the dialogue or change in the opportunity for accessing some finance for the companies in the ecosystem. So there's obviously a clear economic case for nature that, again, many the international community is basically involved in very actively. It's going to for sure come up in the biodiversity COP and the climate COP coming up. These are things that everybody knows and that people are trying to find solutions to. But recognizing that there is a massive gap between kind of the sort of global thinking and actual things happening on the ground. This is where we've tried to kind of focus on a couple of initiatives that can try to move the ball forward a little bit. So, essentially the conversation revolves around this financing green and green finance. And where we're trying to get to is this sweet spot in the far right-hand corner where ecosystem services as a whole are monetized and co-benefits are created through business activities. So, this chart, by the way, is in a very good report produced by the World Bank, and provide the link to that if you haven't seen it before. But essentially, that report outlines some of the issues in this box. But I put it up here because I'm really trying to emphasize where we're going. So if you look on the left-hand side, this part of the chart here, where you have conservation, the traditional kind of World Bank or donor conservation type of project, where you have a conservation project that without cash flow, requiring grant funding or public support, development project with biodiversity component. So this is a traditional sort of World Bank type of project. And it is maybe evolving into something in the past decade, certainly, a conservation project using project-related investment or blended finance. This is starting to come into the picture, and where sort of use of the proceeds of the project are focused on specific ecosystems or protected areas. And but the step that everybody needs to take is to find other sources of value and to measure those sources of value. And this is where the sort of greening finance idea can come in, where you're directing financial flows away from harmful projects towards projects that are having a demonstrated positive impact. Speaking to that, IFC has recently, as the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank that lends to the private sector, has come up with this taxonomy, if you like, of biodiversity sort of beneficial projects that they're beginning to apply and tag all of the lending projects in IFC, and this is towards moving capital away from harmful environmental biodiversity impacts towards others that do good, essentially, with the incentive that you can either blend finance in there, or you can begin to measure and verify some of the biodiversity co-benefits or carbon co-benefits. So specifically on this this idea of matching sources of finance and trying to get some funding into businesses operating in African landscapes. So we're in the process of launching basically what we're calling a biodiversity investment platform. It is going to be called Nature Cap. Here we're doing this in two phases, essentially. The first phase is an emergency fund. So we're fundraising right now, looking to put a facility of probably $5 million initially to support SMEs in Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia, and Mozambique is also possibly being considered, but certainly Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia, where we've done extensive work on the ground in terms of surveying SMEs in the space, and things that we have found. The kind of capital that people need is not as much as you might think. We're looking at kind of $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month type of income to keep businesses alive and going. So what we are targeting with this fund initially is basically what we're calling philanthropic venture capital. So this is people that want to invest in companies that are supporting biodiversity, either directly or indirectly through their operations. And they're not interested in a commercial return. They just want to see this money going towards saving those jobs and kind of contributing to biodiversity in those areas. But the platform idea is to try to drive a new financing model, basically, for biodiversity areas and landscapes in Africa. And here we want to really be aggressive in trying to provide a service to funders and a pipeline that they can invest in enterprises, companies that are supporting in some way biodiversity or benefiting biodiversity. And that's the longer term aim of this. And some of this will be commercial capital, some of it will be the venture philanthropy, but the idea is that the platform will have this function of blending that financing, so de-risking. So we're looking at funds basically being part of this platform, and the platform being a service provider to those funds. And this is the structure basically of this. So the platform at the top there, we have a series of fund managers below that. At a country level, you have field developers and technical assistants that basically do the pipeline development and support the companies involved. You have donors and investors who are participating and contributing to the platform. We have an independent M&E structure, and we're hoping to partner with IUCN to provide that in this whole space. And obviously the investments, the ultimate kind of beneficiaries. And IFC has played this role of basically incubating this structure, and we are, as I said, launching it in March, and in June the platform in its entirety. As another example of what the World Bank might be sort of doing and thinking slightly differently. So here we have I think probably the first ever wildlife conservation bond issue. That I don't think this has happened before. And this is sort of thinking about a different way of financing protected areas that is a little bit more accountable, a little bit more, kind of driven by results. So here are two, on the bottom left-hand corner, are two protected areas that have rhino populations that are essentially in decline. And the objective of this project is to basically stabilize and grow those rhino populations. And the World Bank, the Treasury part of the World Bank, is issuing kind of two bonds, a USD tranche of 100 million and a South African Rand tranche of equivalent of about 40 million. And the GEF is providing the coupon payments to the possible investors. So here what you have is investors in the, say, the South African capital markets who want to invest in rhino conservation for, say CSR or just brand image type of thing. And they're willing to forego their coupon payments until results are achieved, basically. And the World Bank is standing behind that, saying, okay, we will guarantee your principal. So in this case, let's say there are 4 investors of $10 million each. The World Bank says, okay, after 5 years, irrespective of what happens, you will get back your principal, so 0 risk there. And by the way, if results are achieved, the GEF will pay your coupon payments. So you have a potential profit that you can make. And in the meantime, we use your capital to achieve these results by investing in the protected areas and in increased kind of anti-poaching, increased infrastructure, whatever it is that is contributing to that overall objective. And obviously there are kind of independent verifiers of all of this. And so this is an interesting structure because as all of you know, governments in Africa and everywhere are fiscally really constrained, and COVID again has denied them of so much of the kind of normal sources of revenue, particularly tourism revenue and foreign exchange. So there is a shortage of resources coming into this space. So this is a way of thinking, okay, maybe this doesn't have to come from the public coffers. This can come from institutional investors, but the World Bank can provide this kind of intermediary role of just being basically the guarantor for this, but essentially not stopping these activities from going on. And this doesn't have to be on the government books. This can be entirely outside of that. And the interesting part about this dual tranche here is that the US dollar portion is not linked to this particular project in South Africa. It is linked to the World Bank's overall portfolio in biodiversity conservation. So here we're testing the market essentially. So this $100 million USD tranche will be launched in capital markets in Europe and the US to test the appetite for investment in in these kinds of projects in this kind of instrument. So yeah, the whole idea, democratize conservation. So really, I talked to this a little bit at the beginning in terms of accountability, and I think what we're trying to get to is a place where biodiversity rich landscapes that we know are also poverty rich landscapes where other sources of value can begin to increase the dividend from this natural endowment, this natural equity that basically is fundamentally undervalued. And so we have this, this opportunity, I think, now to begin opening this market. And there are all kinds of ramifications for governments. There's obviously a lot of work to do with with governments and establishing natural capital accounting systems and verification that goes with that. But this is also an opportunity for, say, the conservancy community in Africa, where you're looking at protected areas outside the kind of national or the sovereign system, where you might have a large conservancy that can actually go to the market for financing, delivering either biodiversity or carbon or other co-benefits that the market is interested in investing in or buying. Yeah, I guess I stopped there. I've probably taken a little more time than I was supposed to. So thank you for listening, and I'm sorry about all of that. But thank you, Oliver.
Thank you, Sean. What a wonderful presentation. If I was going to prepare a project proposal and justify it, you just gave me the best framework I could imagine. I mean, thanks. It was a very well-made case, and it is based on practical experience. So the tools you're talking about, not only have you done similar things, but you will, as you said, start in March. So I think the whole idea that places where biodiversity landscapes exist very often have also poverty, and therefore using that landscape as a visitation and tourism asset in a sustainable way in the post-COVID-19 world is the big challenge we all have. Somebody was talking about Chumbe Island in Tanzania. It's another great case. I mean, many have survived, including the ones that we will hear in a second. And the question is now for them, taking it to the next speakers, the question to them is not only how are you operating your tourism and conservation examples, but how can you reply to the excellent ideas that Sean has shown? How can we democratize the kind of opportunities that you need? What kind of tools do you need to continue, like Chumbe Island has continued in 2020 thanks to crowdsourcing, and many people have created others, but we have to create a new business plan. What kind of help do you need to keep your business plan afloat? And in that sense, maybe, I don't know, Peter, the order in which we will ask our speakers to come on.
Come to Netzai Bormann, and she has already unmuted.
Excellent, Netzai, come in, share your ideas. I just want to say Netzai's perspective will not come from one business, but will come from her work in a collective of businesses. So it's with you, Netzai. Thank you so much.
Netzai, probably you can share also your video, or switch on your video so we see you, and then share your screen.
Okay, so let me put I've prepared a short PowerPoint that I will talk you through. Hopefully it helps to give a little bit of insight on the work that we are doing here out of Botswana in Southern Africa, in the Southern African Development Community. Just 1 second, trying to get it up.
Yes, we see your screen. Yes.
You see my screen?
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to, just to make sure I stay as clear as possible, I'm going to switch off my video while I give the presentation. It usually helps with the connectivity. Okay, so the purpose here, I'm here based in Botswana working for AFC GOPA on behalf of GIZ, implementing various transboundary tourism initiatives in the Southern African region, just to give a bit of context. Before I go into detail, and I'll try and be as brief as possible, just to give a bit of background about the economic importance of tourism in the Southern African region. We know we talk in direct and indirect contributions of tourism because of the cross-sectoral and variety of support services required for tourism to operate. But in a nutshell, the total contribution of tourism, the latest available stats that we had indicated in excess of $56 billion US. So this is obviously before COVID, 2018 stats. And total employment in excess of 6.3 million jobs. And looking at visitor exports, of over 18 billion US dollars in 2018. There's a variety of work that we are supporting. A large component of that work here is within the context of Southern Africa's transfrontier conservation areas. And to give a bit of a background on what these are, we have 18 transfrontier conservation areas in Southern Africa. They were established by the participating partner countries, or partner states as we refer to them, based on the fact that collectively working together to leverage shared natural capital and cultural heritage would surely contribute positively towards biodiversity conservation, socioeconomic development, and poverty alleviation. And what they are, sometimes typically referred to as peace parks, are they cross-border regions made up of various components with various types of conservation status, and often in certain cases, different land uses as well. And while they're separated, typically separated by borders, they're jointly managed and have joint initiatives by the partner states that make up the transfrontier conservation area. And importantly for us in Southern Africa, a large amount of the most significant and most important tourism destinations for the region are within a transfrontier conservation area, which I will now refer to as TFCAs. My portfolio particularly is focused on providing different kinds of intervention and support on behalf of German Development Corporation within 5 of these 18 transfrontier conservation areas. That's Kavango Zambezi, which you can see is not only the largest in Southern Africa as indicated on the map, but the largest in the world. It's made up of Angola, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. There's Great Limpopo TFCA, which is Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. Lubombo, which is Mozambique, the Kingdom of Swaziland, or now Eswatini, and South Africa. Maloti Drakensberg, which is Lesotho in South Africa, and then Richtersveld, which is Namibia and South Africa. And Peter has asked me to focus the discussion today around the topic of Kavango Zambezi TFCA. And this gives you an indication of what it looks like and where it is. So to give you an overview of the highlights of Kavango Zambezi, or more commonly referred to as KAZA TFCA, it's approximately 520,000 kilometers in size, square kilometers. It's the world's largest TFCA. It's home to the Victoria Falls, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the world's 7 natural wonders of the world, Okavango Delta, which is a World Heritage Site, Tsodilo Hills, another World Heritage Site. There's also in existence a uni visa, which the intent is to have one visa, a tourist visa for all 5 KAZA partner states of Angola, Botswana, Namibia, and Zambia. And this started a number of years ago, and currently it is in place between Zimbabwe and Zambia. And KAZA is working towards, where the countries have already agreed, expanding the scope of this tourist visa. So there is one tourist visa to access and visit all 5 countries. What is also interesting about KAZA, and not only its size, is that there are multiple land uses within this TFCA. National parks, game reserves, forest reserves, game management areas, communal lands, conservation and tourism concessions. Some protected areas have within them concessions for tourism development that is non-consumptive. There's also a huge amount of accessibility, so it's very good in terms of getting to KAZA, both if you're a tourist traveling within Southern Africa to KAZA, or traveling as an international tourist from international destinations off the continent of Africa. We have international airports in Zambia and Zimbabwe. And you will see, interestingly, there is one point where all 4 countries of the 5 meet, which is really centered around the Kasane, Vic Falls kind of area as indicated in this diagram here. So essentially, if you are looking at developing your independent itinerary, or if you're a travel retailer or wholesaler, you really have little to challenge you to put together a multiple country travel itinerary. And there's also relatively good road access to and within Casa. Casa is also a very special destination in that if you compare it to a number of the other TFCAs, the level of development is very well advanced, and the wide variety of activities, accommodation, attractions that you have, more so in the Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe components, but there is a lot on offer, and it's home to 36 formally proclaimed national parks. The elephant typically symbolizes, you know, when we talk about Casa, because it has the largest contiguous population of African elephant on the continent, it's home to a variety of threatened or endangered species, birding, national parks, key destinations like the Okavango Delta, the Makgadikgadi Pans, Victoria Falls, and there are a lot of also adventure type travel activities. And very importantly, between 2.5 to 3 million people live in or around Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area. So culture, heritage, and socio-economic development are extremely high on the Casa development agenda. And the idea is to not only create job opportunities, you know, that are presented through the tourism value chain. It's a plethora of support services that are required, but also leveraging the cultural heritage of the multitude of cultures between these 2.5 to 3 million people as a key tourism development agenda item to alleviate poverty in this region. And so there's an unlimited supply of cultural heritage encounters on offer. Looking at the financial components that were, you know, alluded to as an important component of this discussion, there is an EU survey that was commissioned and implemented by Dr. Anna Spenceley. I'm not sure if she's in this call. I understand that she might have been. And she was commissioned then to do a global study on the impact of COVID-19 on tourism to and within protected areas. The African continent was a part of that study, and she facilitated that study. And the majority of responses received for the Africa-wide study were from Southern and East Africa. And so what we did on behalf of Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area and Great Limpopo Transfrontier Conservation Area, which you might be familiar with, Kruger National Park is one component of Great Limpopo. We commissioned Anna to produce for the TFCAs a report based on extracting data from the findings of the Africa-wide study that were coming from the Casa region and the Great Limpopo region. And I'm able to share with you the findings of this July, August last year, just looking at the financial components. So this slide gives you an indication of the importance or the significance of tourism in the Kavango Zambezi region. And this was coming from operators who were working in Casa and within Casa, but not only limited to the Casa region. And this gives you an indication then of what businesses, so we're talking about market-based contributions within the Casa region and that significance. I'll just touch on a few numbers here, looking at local procurement, for example, in the financial year preceding the COVID crisis, was in excess of almost 28 million US dollars. So local procurement within 50 kilometers, national domestic procurement of over 46 million US dollars is what tourism businesses were spending within the Casa region. Looking at the support services, so entertainment, laundry,
Well, we can't hear you.
etc. This was also quite substantial. Looking at environmental services expenditure, so money spent on security, anti-poaching, concession fees, We were looking at national spend in the region of $18.5 million, again in the financial year preceding the COVID-19 crisis, and local spend on environmental services of almost 4.6 million US. There was also quite substantial, if you see in the bottom right-hand corner, spend on local community initiatives, which vary across the board. An average spend then of the businesses of about 100,000 per year and $10 million US for the financial year. To give you a better understanding, just a nutshell of the type of respondents who contributed to the survey, the responses that came from the operators working in the Gaza region were 170 responses. Some of these respondents offered more than one product or service. Most of the enterprises were small, with less than 50 employees. And it also showed that most respondents were businesses, were for-profit private sector entities. Some businesses, it's the same owner of the business, but operating different components, so accommodation and tour operator and activity, for example. And they weren't, as I mentioned earlier, necessarily only operating within the Gaza region. So if we go back to the previous speaker talking about understanding the financial needs of businesses, when they were asked what kind of support do you need from this 170 responses received, the private sector responded as such. What we saw was that support obviously was most frequently financial support that was needed, support for the businesses and the workers. They also wanted help to identify new source markets and how to promote themselves and new services and products to offer. So what we did see during the year last year was that while COVID was like this big, terrible, massive crisis for the industry and nobody was spared across sectors as a result, it also provided an opportunity, you know, given the slow movement of tourism and the non-movement in certain periods, to reevaluate and see, you know, how we take it as an opportunity as well to see how we can better prepare, how we can look for new markets, how we can repackage, how we can improve the services and quality of our offerings during this downtime. So this is also coming up. And in terms of the approximate value of financial aid, remember that most of these businesses were small businesses. Most enterprises indicated that they needed less than 250,000 US dollars to survive that period. In terms of the types of financial support, so then many were rather looking for, I'm sorry? Many were looking for grants. And then the second largest response then was followed by loans. And then in terms of the impact of the pandemic on protected areas tourism, for many protected areas in Southern African transfrontier conservation areas, like in Kabangu Zambezi transfrontier conservation area, for many of these protected areas, tourism is the largest source of market-based funding for them. So the impact was quite detrimental across the board, not just within TFCAs, but in the various components that make up the TFCAs, and this is applicable to Gaza too. So parks, reserves, community conservancies, concession areas, etc., none of which are mutually exclusive. We also ran a survey for a separate program of work looking at developing a tourism program for the region, for the Southern African region, which is SADC, the Southern African Development Community. We ran a survey to kind of understand from the opinion leaders. So this is major operators, this is tourism ministries, tourism boards, destination marketing organizations. We had responses from 12 of SADC's, or the Southern African region, 16 member states. So the response rate was very good to kind of understand what they thought about what recovery would look like. And 57% indicated they thought we would hit 50% of previous levels during the second half of 2021. And 28% expected to reach 50% in the first half of 2021. You know, this is all very relative because there's too much that is unpredictable about COVID and about the situation and the future effects. But this ran, we closed the survey, I think, August last year. And then in terms of recovering arrivals, 13% expected 100% in 2021. I think more realistic, 43%, 100% during 2022, 28%, 100% during 2023, 16% we're looking at 2024 onwards for a full recovery. And in terms of what the ideas and thoughts were by tourism practitioners, so this is public and private sector alike across the Southern African region, you know, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of opportunities are seen. So, you know, picking up on leveraging partnerships. So the Transfrontier Conservation Area concept is unique in that member states have signed a treaty to work jointly together across a board of variety of activities like CASA. So to leverage that as a low-hanging fruit partnership to work towards collective recovery. Some other responses we got were, you know, to capitalize the low-risk nature of our tourism that we offer here in Southern Africa. So if you look at CASA, for example, this nature-based or ecotourism, establishing or strengthening travel corridors and routes between member states in terms of COVID requirements, looking at harmonizing standard operating procedures, so guidelines, protocols, procedures for COVID-19 within, for example, the CASA region, which is a work assignment that very soon will be underway for CASA. It's in its planning stages now. And implementing domestic and regional tourism marketing strategy drives. So to try and package your costs and your offerings to entice the domestic market and the market within Southern Africa. And then of course, we still face threats of product dilution because businesses are closing, constant international travel warnings. So here in Botswana, for a moment, we were off and then suddenly we were back on in key source markets. You know, anticipations of a possible second wave in the region, the devastating impact it's had on airlines and their struggles, and real and perceived fears. So, you know, some perceptions that no, tourism maybe is contributing towards or causing an increase in COVID-19 could be real or perceived as a fear. So looking at CASA partner states do demonstrate that, you know, they're very prepared to work together. Tourism development as a market-based source of funding and as poverty alleviation and as a tool for regional integration is extremely high on the agenda. And looking at going beyond marketing to market development, so looking at the supply side of tourism market development and also the demand side. And in a way that's not, you don't find the countries competing, but rather working together collectively, saving resources, doing more with less through partnership efforts. And that there's obviously a large dependency within the CASA region on sustainable, healthy, natural and cultural heritage assets towards socioeconomic growth. So in closing, I will show you a few examples of some of the tourism interventions that have taken place in Kavango Zambezi. I mentioned the Univisa that's currently available between Zambia and Zimbabwe and soon to be expanded to the three remaining partner states. The work flow towards this end is in process with continued commitment from the partner states. One example pre-COVID was supporting the Land Rover Germany experience tour of CASA. It was called Let CASA, which really saw the countries pull together with the CASA Secretariat, which is based in Kasane, Botswana, as the facilitator that we supported to make this happen. And this took place between October and November in 2019, 5 countries, 15 days, 18 Land Rovers, 47 participants from Germany, more than 2,000 kilometers driven. And when we look at the results of the exposure, so if we had paid for the coverage of this in the notable print and online publications, the estimated advertising value is in excess of €1 million of that one intervention. Another way that countries have worked together is there was previously no real tool that CASA had that the countries could collectively use for destination marketing of one destination made up of 5 countries, a multifaceted tourism destination. So the member states, again, with the support of the CASA Secretariat, developed its own really wonderful tool that's had excellent reception from trade partners and independent travelers alike, relevant for the CASA region. And this was recently launched a couple of months ago. Public-private dialogue has also been a very effective tool leveraged by CASA. This is one example of an event that we supported or facilitated last year, which had the destination marketing organizations, their CEOs, talking to private sector about how to reimagine and repackage tourism. And a variety of these outputs then were actually taken forward with the facilitation of CASA Secretariat. And then there are also different ways of working with the private sector. The one way is working within the realm of packaged travel to the region, so partnering with specialist and large and established outbound tour operators. So for example, Gibeco is an outbound tour operator based in Germany that sells packages to German travelers to the CASA region and other destinations in Africa. And they have on the market bookable itineraries to travel to CASA TFCA. This photo on the bottom left is them selling these itineraries at CMT Stuttgart, which is one of the world's largest business to consumer trade fairs. Other examples, Wigwam is another German one. Just here on the left is an example of a bookable itinerary from a UK tour operator called Far and Wild. And in the top left corner, it's just an indication of some of the things that you find in CASA. The point is, and the loud cry that comes from the private sector in the CASA region is, if you provide us with an enabling environment for tourism to thrive, we will continue to invest in new product development, in new accommodation, in new restaurants like this floating raft, which is a restaurant that sits on the river in between Namibia and Botswana. The basis of the point of the view being the easier it is for us to do business, the more that we invest, the more we contribute to biodiversity conservation, and the more we are able to create jobs, thereby reducing poverty. And that brings me to the end. I hope I didn't do too badly for time.
Well, I don't know about time, Netai, but you certainly did well in terms of content. Thank you very much. It was, I want to again highlight the quality of the intervention. So I think complementing Sean's presentation, what you helped us with is to understand, first of all, who we're talking about. So thank you so much for that profile that you provided us with. But also you made very clear what your profiled LT&C champions need. Almost half of them accepted. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some noise. I don't know if this is Greg. If so, then it's fine because he will be speaking next. But anyway, I just wanted to say that we heard that people need relief from debt. They need support to pay salaries. They need support to pay less taxes. Those are all things that institutions like the World Bank and governments can help them with. Buy cheaper is related to airlines. We all know that getting international travelers and national travelers in is fundamental. And in this sense, I want to highlight the campaigns that UNWTO and others have done to both promote safe travel and come up with guidelines for COVID standards. You know, this is all very important. So buy cheaper, get airlines to work. This is all extremely important. I think also what you mentioned about the promotion of tourism is very important locally. Many of the LT&C champions and your constituents. They need to sell more locally and regionally today. So the ideas of CASA are extremely good for institutions like the World Bank to support and others, which is the theme of today. What's the enabling environment? In this sense, I want to now call on Greg, who has a personal and wonderful story of his own. Maybe you want to share with us a little bit, Greg, what is your experience? And you can add to what both presenters just came. It's with you, Greg. Please go on.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Maybe I can just introduce you. We are hearing now Mabrice Ruanka, who is the colleague of Greg Bakunzi, as there's a big event going in the background of him where Greg is involved. And we have pre-recorded Greg's presentation, and I will run it quite soon, but probably, Mabrice, you can just tell us a little bit about the event which is in the background.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peter, and good evening to everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Greg, he's just around. He's just around with me here. We think you can see him, and he's still very busy on the other live streaming activity he was doing, and maybe I'll be happy to share with you the activity which is going on the ground, and Greg is the co-host of what is happening live streaming now.
Okay, now we run then his presentation now.
My name is Greg Bakunzi from Amahoro Tours and Red Rocks, Rwanda. I have been working in the tourism industry for the last 19 years and operating in the 3 different countries. So that's Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo. All the idea behind my organization is to see how can we link tourism and conservation together for sustainable development. We have done a couple of projects in Rwanda which has really been successful, where the local communities are now benefiting from the tourism direct from what they are doing. Let it be from the art of conservation, let it be into the weaving basket, showing their culture, which we have also seen that this is one of the most important things that the locals and the tourists really enjoy. So when it comes on the tourist part, what happens with the tourist part, they just really enjoy this part of experience where they're interacting with the locals. And when it comes to the local communities, they are always eager to even get to speak to the tourists. At the same time, benefit from them. They get paid from, what they have demonstrated to them. They even be able to sell their crafts that are made by them. Tourism and conservation has been really one of the biggest industry, but the local community
Greg, I think we've lost you there. I think we're hearing the sound of the music, but we're not hearing you.
I think Mr. Peter has a problem on his connection. Can you hear me? My connection is nice. Mr. Peter, can you hear me?
That. So we always say
the
landscape might be the difference. The communities, they are different, they have different cultures. Rwandan culture is different from the Congolese culture. So that's also another thing that people should be able to, get to enjoy while they are visiting those gorillas, endangered species that are in those protected areas. Sustainable tourism has been a big story in so many organizations and companies, but it's now time for us to really see how can it really benefit the local communities, even though there are always some challenges to achieve this. If we are to get to make sure that tourism benefits the local communities, there are always some challenges. And these challenges, they are not only faced by us who are also like involved in direct, but we also get some challenges to involve the community themselves in order to achieve the goals. And one of the biggest challenge that we face is the funding. When it comes to the funding, most of the banks, they need some tangible stuff that they can show that this is really, you are able to pay back. And we can't predict about this industry, but we don't know if this industry is kind of fragile when it comes to the weather, to the insecurity, when it comes to the pandemic. Anything can really affect it directly. But we still also need to stay closer to our community members, to the local people that are also involved in it, so that we can carry on like some workshops. And our companies, our organizations, sometimes they don't have that access to the funding to make sure that they can facilitate those kind of workshops, trainings, and also getting closer to them.
Yeah, it seems we have a connection problem again. Maybe we should just let him finish because I think we can read him well. I don't know about you, Peter, but I think as moderator, maybe on behalf of the 30 people that are listening in and for the sorry situation that we can't hear, He's coming in. Every time I complain, he comes in. Come in, Greg.
Collaboration and partnership within our organizations. I would like to conclude by saying that great visions need great partners. So let us try to see how we can all do the partnership and see how we can achieve our goals. Thank you.
So hopefully
I think he came in exactly at the right moment, right, Peter? Because I think what you just said is the best challenge for the time that we have in this discussion yet. And I want to just highlight how fundamental your participation was, Greg. And I don't know if there are opportunities for you to interact with the wonderful people that were and still show the crafts of the people around your operation. So we've seen musicians, we've seen painters, we've seen dancers. It's been a wonderful show and a wonderful contribution from Red Rocks and Amahoro Tour. So thank you so much, Greg. And I think what's demonstrated also there very clearly is the approach that he has taken, which is a multi-business approach, community-based tourism, but with a multi-based economic basis. So involving the community in cultural and economic manifestations, but also looking at agriculture, looking at other forms, various economic instruments included in what Greg is doing, from conservancies to concessions to partnerships. So I think all of that was very clear, the contribution. Also, it was very clear, coming back to what Sean began, what is meant with democratizing conservation. I think what Greg was doing is exactly democratizing conservation. The involvement in what we're seeing are ways to give pride to cultural manifestation and to give economic power to communities. So I think in this sense, it's a good closing to the presentation. I don't know, Peter, if you'd like to share some thoughts at this moment, or if the people from Rwanda have any concluding thoughts.
I think there's still Mabrice Ruanka on the other side, and as Greg is behind. And if something from the recorded version of his presentation did not come over, we will also put on YouTube his final presentation altogether, so you could see it again there. But what we can do now is probably can involve also others from the event in Musanze in Rwanda, and all the listeners at this presentation. And I would like to ask Anne whether she has seen some specific questions on the chat, which is some of our speakers should be able to answer.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, one specific question came from Ron Mother that was directed to Sean, I guess, that he can please provide links to the reports mentioned and other helpful resources that are online for the public, and then he can add it on and feature it on the planeta.com. And then there was a great discussion between Sibylle, Vicky Smith, and Oliver and Netsai. I think you've discussed this in the chat already. If Sibylle or Vicky wants to raise any more questions that came up, you can please do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, we have survived. We have about 50 people employed, among them 8 park rangers, and we managed to keep the park rangers in the jobs by funding, so the park is fully protected for the whole time, so no problem there. The rest of the team, especially hospitality, had to be put on kind of unpaid leave, but got a basic salary and health insurance still. So all this was paid by crowdfunding. Yeah. Meanwhile, we did look into all these instruments which were offered, like carbon offsetting, etc. And it was quite an ordeal because, of course, these carbon offsetting systems go for huge areas, yeah, hundreds of hectares, even more. And our park is rather small, but very diverse. We have a forest, coral reef, very virgin. We have seagrass beds, intertidal areas. We have coral reef. Yeah. Now to calculate the value as a carbon sink of these areas is haunting. Yeah. We looked into the Mikoko Pamoja project in Kenya, which is well known, which was assisted by a British university. I don't remember which one. But conversing with the professor who assisted that project to actually benefit from carbon offsetting, and they sell carbon credits now for seagrass beds. Yeah, the university invested $230,000 to establish the value of the carbon which is sunk into this area. About 10 years of research was needed by an academic institution with a lot of PhDs. Yeah. And what came out of it, selling these credits, was for the village, preserving the mangroves in particular, preserving $20,000 a year. Yeah. So value for money is really a little bit of a challenge there. Yeah. You have a university supporting for 10 years with PhD, calculate and make the case for the certification. And then the village gets $20,000 per year, which is something we as Chubu could not survive on. Yeah. So this is just one example. So I've been talking to also the folks of Blue Capital, fantastic initiative, trying to support marine parks and marine areas, but again, large areas. A small marine park like ours, we would need like 250 to 500,000 a year. It's peanuts for them. So it's not worth the investment. They won't. We need like subsidizing the process, yeah, which of course is again something which would be something. We would be very happy already to have a better investment climate. We pay full taxes. We have no tax incentive whatsoever in Tanzania. Privately protected areas are not a legal possibility in Tanzania. It's not really possible. We used special legal possibility in Zanzibar. It would not be possible to do this in Tanzania mainland, what we are doing. Yeah. So referring to Resolution 36 of IUCN and the World Bank promoting implementation of this instrument would be a huge help for the private sector to invest directly into privately protected areas like they exist in many other countries, Kenya, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa. There are hundreds of them. And many of us are part of a network, so we can exchange experiences. So this in a nutshell, yeah. So I'm still looking for funding. For 21, we have secured funding from GIZ, from a Corona emergency program. I have to say again, Corona in Tanzania officially does not exist. Yeah, so you can't have a project to support Corona. So it's a special facility of GIZ or BMZ to mitigate socioeconomic impact of Corona. In this case, support our staff with alternative activities, which we do. For the year 21, we are now covered in the basics, but we have to plan for 22 as well, because as it looks for tourism to recover to pre-COVID levels will be a challenge, especially for long-haul destinations like ours, compounded also with flight shame and other developments, yeah. And so we have quite a lot of balls in the air, and I would be very happy to exchange experiences with anybody on this panel. With advice I can give, recommendations, but also with questions I would have how to go about it in detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sibylle. Probably we should.
Excellent comments. I just want to make a few comments on that. The first one, and this connects also to what Greg was saying, I want to take away the taboo that comes sometimes with saying grants for community-based tourism enterprises. We need grants for community-based tourism enterprises to pay for salaries. It's not a problem. It should exist as a tool. So many other companies receive huge grants nowadays as part of COVID-19 recovery packages. We know that large corporations get grants to a scale that was never paid before. Even by the most liberal of governments, they make payouts with no expectation of return to many of the large corporations to keep the production systems working, to keep workers employed. Well, I don't see why community-based tourism enterprise shouldn't receive the kind of attention. I think this is clear. One thing I wanted to add, Sibylle, on what you said. NetSai's people said that if we can get to the end of 2021 with 50% recovery, that's a good goal. I think it makes sense. I'll tell you why, because if we get our vaccinations more or less in line to levels that at least allow people to travel again to a certain extent by the second level, then we can imagine that by the second level, we get to something like 50%. And that's essential because having been in tourism for more than 25 years in my life, I know that if you have less than 35 occupancy levels for hotels or operations, you don't make a profit anyway. So you have to change your business plan. So if we don't aim for 50% at the end of this year, we need to change our businesses radically. And we may need to do that anyway. So all of those things shall be taken into consideration. And just to close this thing in the sense of what are the tools that we need other than credit and capital loans, which is also called a grant, and other tools that we need to make available, such as technical assistance, I think the safety is essential. Tourists are concerned about safety against the COVID infections, and employees should be too. And we in the industry, in the sector, should be concerned as well. So I think one of the most worthy things we can see are that we have today extremely safe protocols and standards for COVID-19 safe travel. They exist. We need to put them into practice. And one thing that we have seen in cities like Montreal is that the risks from safe international travel are significantly lower than the risks from internal non-safe meetings, which is where the majority of cases are coming from, and from schools, which are maybe a necessary evil, but still in some countries are causing a lot of infections. So, you know, to pour it all on the international trade and to stop international trade just because it's easy is like looking for your lost keys under the lamp because that's where you have light instead of looking where you should, where you lost them, you know? So we should definitely facilitate the kind of travel that people like you are doing. I think those are maybe my last comments, but I don't know if other people have any comments.
There's a question from Teresa from Mozambique. Do you want to talk yourself, Teresa?
I can
I
start,
can do it.
but maybe Teresa can make the point better.
Yeah. So I'm not from Mozambique. I'm from Portugal. Now I am in Portugal. I cannot go to Mozambique. But I'm working for the Mozambique Maritime Special Plan. And I have the feeling we are discussing now the pressures on the coastal areas, on the marine areas. We know that there is lots of biodiversity, lots of tourism potential. But in Mozambique, for several reasons, they had war, they had very expensive flights, they have lots of things. Tourism is very difficult to start and to attract people and so on. And furthermore, we have pressures from the people that are doing, they bring a lot of riches to the country with extractions of rare sands, of gas, and so on. And they are having, and there are pressures over the potential protected areas. Some are not even protected areas. They are key biodiversity areas and so on. So how can we boost tourism in order to compete with the other pressures and also give awareness to biodiversity and help conservation. So I took a lot of time writing that, and now it's not easy to explain speaking.
Well, I would like to start just by, I mean, first of all, of course, it's a wonderful question. You're putting this not out of theory, you're living it. So, you know, if you find a solution, you share it with all of us. It's a very good question. But I would like to say the first thing is that I don't think that we have a solution for sustainable, conservation-focused and community-based tourism yet. We need some variables of this equation need to be clear. One of them is the safety of travel. So that requires vaccination, that requires standards, that requires a lot of things. Until we know exactly what it's going to look like, most operators today are living in particular situations. So if you have a target market that still works, you can optimize your sales in this market, you know. But I think we need to think of, first of all, we need to think of the kind of loans and capital loans, which is basically a grant that Sean was talking about. We need to factor this in. We need to have crowdsourcing. We need to have some emergency channels in the short term, because the tourism volumes are not going to pick up within the next 3 or 4 months. It would not be realistic to think of this. So I think what we should look at is at their medium and long-term goals, like diversifying your market, trying to find other ways like research or like land conservancies or payment for ecosystem services or other ideas, including agriculture and including sustainable kind of buffer zone, non-timber-based products and handicraft and, you know, production of cultural handicraft, everything. But also, I think very importantly, we need to think of what are the new kind of travel that we will need. One thing that I know from the previous discussion we had is you will have to find your client. You can't rely on just, you know, going to the local airport and getting a few clients for your place. That doesn't work anymore because they don't come. So what you need to do is you need to go to the originating country and, you know, really fidelize, make your clients your ally, make your client come to you because they want to come to you. This is something that we're learning. And in fact, a lot of what Ron Mader, who is with us, does is this kind of guerrilla marketing and the messaging to your people where you are. So those are parts of the response, but I want to give people an opportunity to come in as well. Netsai, I think you had raised your hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, you know, I think I have to express an appreciation. If we think about Mozambique, the work that we have supported in Mozambique while we observe is part of the Lubombo Transfrontier Conservation Area, which is comprised of South Africa, Swaziland, or now the Kingdom of Eswatini, and Maputo Special Reserve, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And we ran a press trip. We proposed this to 3 countries who had never jointly really worked together on marketing one destination. And we were able to, primarily because Mozambique was in the proposed itinerary, entice South African Airways to give us flights for 5 German major print journalists, South African tourism to actually participate in a cross-border press trip for the first time, South African Tourism Germany. And Swaziland jumped in, and Inatua jumped in Mozambique. And the reason was, when we discussed this and pitched this at ITB, which is the world's largest tourism business-to-business trade fair, Mozambique, surprising to me, is one of my favorite destinations. Don't quote me on that. Seems like a hidden gem, an unexplored, like unimaginable, strong curiosity for trade. And I found that remarkable because Mozambique is ready for tourism. I think that if we look at examples of how, I just wanted to flag the excellent work that Peace Parks Foundation is doing in Mozambique, in Maputo Special Reserve, which I think is often amongst development practitioners not fully acknowledged as being the right approach to tourism development, which is create the enabling environment like Peace Parks is working to do in Maputo Special Reserve that will entice and incentivize private sector to then come and invest in setting up business and running shop, because they're the ones who fully know how to do tourism, how to make it profitable, and in that way create and generate and have sustainable jobs. I mean, there are various models, and a successful model is a community-owned, I believe private sector run lodge that's supported within Maputo Special Reserve, Anvil Bay, but it's so expensive and there aren't any other accommodation options currently in Maputo Special Reserve that can open you up to a broader market. And what Peace Parks is doing is it's setting up the stage in Maputo Special Reserve to incentivize and then putting out to concession opportunities that are nicely packaged for private sector to come in and play their role. And those to me are typically the most viable commercially approaches to doing business, is create the enabling environment as the development workers in the development space, make it known that it's ready for business. I kid you not, the bush to beach opportunities to piggyback off tourism to South Africa, for example, through Kruger down the coast, you know, or through Eswatini into Mozambique, it's just insane. And the amount of interest from trade and travelers, particularly the German market, which we've observed, is there. So it's about have the enabling environment, let people know you're ready for business, and incentivize private sector to come in there and run business and do good business, like put the right mechanisms in place so they don't do more damage than good. And you've got a pretty good recipe going there. And I think the best example that I've seen is Peace Parks' work in Maputo Special Reserve in Mozambique as an excellent example. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And I take the occasion, Sean just said goodbye. And so I take the occasion not only to thank you, Netsai, very much for your very passionate and very experience-based comments, but also to Sean and also those who may need to leave now as we close our webinar. I think it was a major success. I think we've heard from you and several others what are realities out there in the field. I think we learned a lot. I at least learned a lot. So thank you to every one of you who took the time to be with us. And I say again, Red Rocks rocks. Because thank you so much. We saw such a great demonstration. I don't know how many of you were enjoying the dances and the music that were going on there, but this is a great team. Thank you, Greg, and thanks to you, Netsai, and thanks to you, Sean, for the work that you do, as well as all the other LT&C champions on this call. So thank you very much. I don't know if you have any other last words, Peter, but I'm sure we will create other occasions like this.
Yes, we can just conclude by saying, which I also put on the chat, that we will provide all the free presentations on our website in a post, and I will give you the link to this. Also, the recording of the whole session we will put on YouTube, and we'll provide the link to that.
I think we should continue to have these discussions. I think we had a good session in Africa. We should probably explore other places and could deepen in Africa. I think there are other opportunities, among them the Arctic, which is beginning with a great program. So tourism and conservation is our theme. So thanks for your contribution.
Thank you all together.